Go ahead, Theresa.
Hey, well, thanks, Jen. And yeah, and I'm a parent of an individual with a disability, and he is an owner of an ABLE account. So again, Theresa Baldry, I'm with the Rural Institute. I'm under the Transition and Employment Projects. And on this slide, you have a link to Montana ABLE, because I'm going to spend most of the time talking specifically about Montana ABLE, and we're going to jump right in. So on this next slide, you're going to see an image that shows you what the website looks like. So sometimes I think people think they've gone to the right website, but it's really helpful if you have a visual to support you as to what does that website look like. So besides the address, you have that. And let's talk about somewhat about what ABLE accounts are. They are a savings tool for people who could be impacted by what are sometimes called means-tested resources. So ABLE accounts are available across the nation for qualified individuals with disabilities to save money without having that impact to public benefits or means-tested benefits. So a lot of times for people with disabilities, when they get near $2,000, which is that spending limit, that asset limit that they can have, either a rep payee or family are encouraging them to spend down that money, get it below $2,000 so that you're still eligible for your next Social Security check. In reality, money can go into an ABLE account and they could actually have over $2,000. And there are so many things that we need in life related to that disability, that having a place to save money and build money can really be valuable. I do see that we have some numbers in the chat. So I'm just going to say from the beginning, because I'm going to try and cover a lot of information in a brief time here, I'm going to wait and answer questions at the end, and then I'll try to cycle through them and see what all I can catch. So sorry about that. That's just how I'm going to move forward with it.
Hey, Theresa, I'm just sending links as you go.
Okay, and I'm going to send a link toward the end of one of my slides. I have one copied that I'm hoping is going to paste still. So next, the piece about ABLE accounts is that money can grow in an ABLE account tax-free if it's used in relation to disability expenses. And we're going to talk about what qualified disability-related expenses are. And what does ABLE stand for? It stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, ABLE. National legislation was passed in 2014. And Montana was great about being prepared and on the money and ready to go. So in 2017, those were something that became available in Montana. Another really important one when we start talking about ABLE accounts is this is not an option that you can go and open at your local bank. A lot of times folks contact me and don't realize that this isn't something they can call their bank about and ask. Some banks now may know about them, but a lot of them tend to not be aware of what an ABLE account even is. It's actually only available online, which sometimes means that individuals with disabilities who want to open these accounts may need assistance. Either they don't have access to online, or because that completing it in an online process can be difficult, they may need some extra help. But I want you to know that ABLE accounts are only available in an online format. So who can have an ABLE account? Eligible people with a disability can open an ABLE account and can have help opening an account. Who's eligible? That's going to be people who, sorry, this is going to look confusing. They have to have their disability be known prior to the age of 26 currently. So they may be 36 years old, but the disability has to have been documented somewhere, and Social Security or Social Security disability income may know already about the disability, but it has to be documented currently before age 26. In 2026, because now we got this 26 together to add to the confusion, that's going to change to age 46, and that's a piece of federal that will also impact the state of Montana. So after 2026, January of 2026, an individual could be 46 years of age, and that the disability has to be present before 46 years of age. And part of why that law change went into place was looking at helping veterans. how is it that we are helping individuals who've gone and fought for our country and now potentially have an injury that is creating a disability, for them to now be able to access this savings program because it is such an amazing tool to be able to access. So besides being disability eligible, there's these next components. And they, even though there's an and here, do fall in an or. So either you're already on SSI or SSDI because of your disability, then you're considered eligible for an ABLE account. Second, it could be that if that's not the one, maybe it is that you're blind according to the Social Security Act. So that's another or the last one. So you're not on SSDI, you're not on SSI, you're not blind, but you have documentation in your medical files and your doctor's willing to write a letter stating that a severe disability was evident prior to age 26 and write that documentation for you. There's a sample form on the Montana ABLE that you can look at as far as what that could be, but you will need to look at establishing a letter from a medical provider for that documentation if it were ever called into question. Who are people who can be helpers in creating that ABLE account? So right now, who are the people who are helping that individual with their money? It could be that they're using supported decision-making and their supporters are helping them manage their money. They could help them open an ABLE account. It can be parents, it can be grandparents, it could be a representative payee. If they're needing a power of attorney, so maybe this ABLE account is being opened for a minor child, then that would fall under guardian piece, but maybe it's that they're now an adult and this is their account and they want help managing their account. And they want someone else receiving that documentation. There's a power of attorney that is specific to ABLE accounts that can be completed in order for the individual who owns that account, who is an adult, to have assistance with their ABLE account. And a guardian can help open an ABLE account for someone. Which ABLE account? This is a great question that I often get because, believe it or not, there are 46 state ABLE programs, as well as the District of Columbia has an ABLE program that can be chosen from. Now, not all of them take people from other states. So one of the notes you see on here is open enrollment. You need to check and see if a state program does allow for open enrollment. I've given you a link on this slide where you can compare state ABLE programs and you can compare some of the features. So you might be interested in A, do they have open enrollment? B, a debit card. Being able to access a debit card is an important piece to me. Maybe it's that I need to find out, what are the charges when there are distributions? That's an important piece to me. Maybe tax benefits are an important piece to me. So you can compare and look at ABLE programs to see what features each one has. They allow you to compare up to 3, and that link is going to help you look at that. I want you to think about why a Montana ABLE program. And to me, one of the most important pieces about that is our state income tax deduction. So when they were creating the law for Montana to have an ABLE program, they also wrote in a state income tax deduction that can be used on your state income taxes. So is what you're able to do is when you deposit money into someone's ABLE account, specific people, and we're going to talk about those, it can be the account owner themselves, a spouse of the account owner, a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, or a child. So we've got a really long list in the state of Montana. All can be, as long as they're residents of Montana and contributing to an ABLE account, they can look at counting their contributions up to $3,000 on their state income tax. And that's a yearly contribution and tax deduction that they can access. It's only for residents in the state of Montana for that. But to me, it's a really important piece. It's a piece that I get to use every year in that I can contribute up to The other contributions that I put in, up to 3,000 of that for myself is eligible on my taxes. Same for my husband, and same for my child's my young adults siblings are eligible for that who live in Montana. Montana does have open enrollment, and they also have the debit card option. We'll talk a little bit about fees later about what some of those debit card costs may be, but they do have that option. Another important one for Montana is there are no fees or limits to the number of withdrawals you can make in a month. Some other states do limit both that and do have fees associated with their ABLE account. So that's just a little bit for you to say. I'm not saying you have to choose an ABLE account. I'm saying here's why you might want to consider ABLE account and a Montana ABLE account. So how do you do this? Just like everything, there's a bit of a process for opening an ABLE account. I'd like to say it's a 15-minute process. It really does take more time than that. I'll be honest. It is a piece that you can enroll online. I often suggest that you go, and the second option is where they've got a paper option. I'd consider printing out all of those questions so you've gathered all the information before you start the online process. You know what you have to have, such as the person will need an identification card. That can be any form of Montana issued ID. It can be a driver's license. It can be a military ID, but they have to have an identification card. Now, there is a little asterisk there in that you can choose to open one without an identification card, but then they cannot access the checking account option for a Montana ABLE account. You've got to have $25 to open an account. So it's not a lot of money to open an account. You're going to need some other information that you might have written on that paper form, but you will need some additional information. And great question that I was asked earlier today, whose information needs to be on that form, on the application, on the enrollment form online? We're talking about the person who owns the account. So the person with a disability is the owner of the account. That means if they're a child or an adult, the person with a disability is the owner of the account. And that's whose information we're going to be putting in the application part that we're filling out. So it's going to be their first and last name. It's going to be their social security number. It's going to be the date they were born, the year, the month. Now, they may or may not have a phone number. If they have one and they can be contacted at that number, that's one you can list. If they're using supported decision-making and someone's helping them with their finances, maybe the number that should be listed is who is their supporter. But think of that phone number as who will be called in relation to that account. Same piece with that email address. Where do we want emails in regard to this account going? Where does information go or questions go in relation to that account? And if there is a helper, there is a section to fill out that helper information as well as what their role is. One of the hardest parts of decisions in an ABLE account, at least for me, because I'm not great at investments, is understanding all your investment choices. You will have to make a choice on how you want to be invested. And fortunately, the Montana ABLE website does a really nice job of talking to you about those investment choices. The last piece I do recommend is taking a look at the disclosure documents. They're not pleasant. They're 150 pages and they are written in legalese, not plain language. But there are pieces that I will tell you should consider taking a look at. So we need to talk about a couple pieces here now. How do I get money into that ABLE account? I open it up. I've got it. I want it to grow for my person. How do I get money in? Nice thing is you or anybody can contribute to an ABLE account. So if you have family that are eligible for that Montana state tax deduction, share about it. You also, if you, and we'll talk about it with YouGift, but you can have a little code where you can post and say, here's the way that you can contribute to my account. Anybody can contribute to an individual's ABLE account. One way you can deposit money into that is via check. For some people, especially grandparents, they want to write a check and there's a form that can be filled out to go with that check and it goes straight to that individual's ABLE account. For people who are managing the account, there's an electronic funds transfer option. So you select which accounts are going to be linked to that ABLE account. So you can move money into the ABLE account and out of the ABLE account. We're going to talk about how to be careful there about who is that account owner, but there are ways to link different accounts to the ABLE account. It could be that it's a payroll direct deposit that goes in, and it could be reoccurring contributions. Because I don't want to forget making my contribution to the ABLE account. Mine's set up as a reoccurring contribution. So I know it's always going in there, and I'm contributing what I'm comfortable with to that ABLE account. We talked a little bit about, you can have that code. It's called UGift. And that code is something that you can give to anybody in order to make contributions to an ABLE account. I want to talk a little bit about that money in there can only be on an annual basis, what's considered the federal gift amount. So up to $18,000. And that's part of why our earlier conversations about trusts become really important. You can only have up to $18,000 for 2024 put into an ABLE account. It's whatever the annual federal gift limit is, what that limit is for each year. So far, every year that I've been doing it, it seems like that number has changed. The reason that's important is if you are an individual who's working and making money, you can actually put in yourself more than that $18,000 into your ABLE account because of a special piece of law called Able to Work Act. And it allows people to have more in that account, potentially up to $32,580 being that maximum for this year. But you look at it as a few rules to consider. One, you and your employer can't be contributing already to your retirement. There can't be a retirement account where money's going because you're looking at your ABLE account as being a financial tool towards your retirement. Second, you can contribute up to that extra $14,000 of what you get paid. It is actually higher in Alaska and Hawaii. You do have a form for the Montana ABLE account that you have to fill out. And I've given you another resource to talk about this Able to Work Act because for people who are working, it's another way to be growing their money in that ABLE account. So if we're putting money in, we might want to know how are we going to get money back out and how can we use that? So again, you can go in online and log into the account and select withdrawal. From there, you get to pick how and where the money's going to go. I have a caution there because if you're sending it to an account, so if the account is belonging to that individual, so the ABLE account belongs to them and the account where the money is going to go belongs to them, it's really important that that money go out the same month it comes in, not to be counted as a resource. That's really important. It's not that money can't go in, but it's got to go in and out that same month. Now, it can also be sent to you in a check, or that check can be sent to someone else. In my son's situation, he chose to use money in his ABLE account that he'd been saving and saving to help share the purchase of a new vehicle. Instead of having the money go into his account because he doesn't want it to be in there for any reason at all that's above that resource, he had the check from the Montana ABLE account sent directly to the purchaser where the vehicle was being purchased. So he didn't have to have it in his account at all, yet his name's on the title and he was able to use those funds and is very proud of the fact that he is an owner of a vehicle. You can call the Montana ABLE program and they can talk with you about how to have those funds distributed. There's a paper form in which you can submit to ask to have money withdrawn. And there's two different addresses where you send that paper form. And that's one is for a regular, however, and the second would be you're mailing it overnight. And so with that overnight, there's a separate address to respect that. The last way to be getting money out is if you're using that debit card option, or you have checks that are linked to that checking account option. So what can I use money in my ABLE account for? Qualified disability related expenses. And so what are those? Those are things that are extra extra things you pay for because of your disability to improve health, independence, and your quality of life. I have a whole list of them here, and I wanted to talk just a little bit on them, but Katie, I can't tell where I'm at on time. Can you help me out there?
You are doing all right. You've only got a couple more slides, and I think you'll be just fine. Go ahead.
So when we're talking about education, that can be tuition, books, tutoring, even a meal plan at a college. Housing, that's a big one, that housing expenses can be considered a qualified disability related expense. That can be rent, it can be mortgage, it can be property tax, and it can be HOA fees. Food, one that can't often be paid by other things, can indeed be paid for out of an ABLE account. Transportation, that could be that you need, you have car payments, or you want to access a bus pass. You need to pay for a taxi, or maybe you're using an Uber ride. Trains and airplanes, all of those come under transportation. Employment, training, and support. So maybe it's that you wanted a job coach or you need that job support. It could be continuing education classes. All of those can be paid for out of an ABLE account. Assistive technology, and to me, that's like the limit on that. There are so many things that relate to a person's disability that often aren't considered a medical device or meet where insurance is going to pay for it. Those pieces of assistive technology can be paid for out of an ABLE account. Health and wellness prevention. So that's your unreimbursed medical expenses. We all run into those. Some of us use a flex plan to help for them, but maybe there's dietary supplements you're taking, or maybe there's other healthcare products that you're taking. Financial management, maybe you need help understanding and preparing your taxes, or you're consulting a financial advisor. Those all can come out of there. There may be legal fees that you have that you need to take care of. Oversight and monitoring, again, maybe you're paying someone to assist you in managing your money or providing some oversight on pieces. Again, that can come out of an ABLE account. Funeral and burial expenses, and we're going to talk about this again when we get a little further, but those are expenses that again can come out of that ABLE account. And personal support services. So there are a lot of ways that an ABLE account can be used to improve that quality of life. Here's a piece that I really want to make sure people understand. So the expenses must be related to maintaining or improving the beneficiary, the account owner's health, independence, and quality of life. So it has to be related to the beneficiary's disability, are for the benefit of the person with the disability. So one of those pieces that comes up sometimes is, hey, we're all going to take a trip to Disneyland and we're going to pay for it out of the ABLE account. Well, if the person with a disability wants to go to Disneyland and maybe they are a person who needs support to do that, yes, their expenses to go to Disneyland could be covered. Yes, the expenses of someone supporting them. But for it to be a group of 6 or 7 people, no, not all of those would count as a qualified disability related expense. So it has to have direct impact to the person and be a benefit to the person. This inclusion of basic living expenses is huge for ABLE accounts. It's one of the few pieces that can still be used for that beyond a Social Security check. And I think that's really huge for people. My son ran into a period of time where he wasn't receiving his Social Security and he still could use his ABLE account to pay for his rent, to pay for other bills he had that came in the month while they were determining whether his business was a hobby or actually a business. Expenses for items which are not necessarily considered medically necessary, and expenses that don't provide benefit to other people beyond that of that eligible person. So again, just making sure that it's going to relate back to the individual themselves. So what does it cost? And this is another piece where ABLE accounts are unique. There's only a quarterly fee of $15 every 3 months. Now, there are a couple of other fees that you can run into, so I like people to be aware of them. Each investment choice you select will have fees based upon how invested you are, how much service is being provided around your investment. There's a service fee if you're bouncing checks or if you're doing wire transfers. There's also an extra fee for that debit card option. So if you want that checking account, there is a fee for the checking account. It varies based on whether or not, just like a regular checking account, do you want it to be electronic or do you want to receive paper copies? And a book of checks is $6. That's a lot cheaper than the last time I paid for checks, because I still do write checks. What are some of these limits? So you can only have one ABLE account per person. So throughout the nation, you can only have one ABLE account. You can't have more than that. We talked a bit about the amount of the money. So for 2024, only $18,000 can be contributed to that account. Factually, we've only hit our limit 1 year. We've never been able to get that full amount in there before that. Now, there is that exception that we talked about for the individuals. So for my son, money he contributed from his working could go above that $18,000 through the Able to Work Act if he completed paperwork. Another big one is if you have over $100,000 in an ABLE account, your Social Security is going to stop being sent. They're saying that if you've got that much money, you don't need your Social Security check to be living, but you still have access to your Medicaid. As soon as that account drops back under 100,000, you would again be eligible for the SSI. They keep that as your eligibility is presumed, but because of your resources, once it's over $100,000, they're going to look at, do you really need that Social Security check if you have this much money in savings? Now, for some people who aren't on SSI, but maybe they were on SSDI, they may want to be using that ABLE account as a retirement account. And Montana has a savings limit in their ABLE accounts of $396,000 can be put into that ABLE account. But another big limit, it only can be used for qualified disability related expenses, but we did talk again how broad that is. And a really important piece, just like everything else when we're connected to Social Security potentially, we want to be making sure we're keeping records and receipts for how the money is being used. So if you've got contributions that are going in on a regular basis, you've got a record of that in the statements that you're getting, and they maintain those pieces that you can go back and look at your records that are online. But if you're spending money out of that ABLE account, be making sure you're keeping a receipt and how that money was used out of the ABLE account so you can show how it was a qualified disability related expense. Some of the big questions that I get asked are, what happens to the funds in an ABLE account after the death of the owner? What about this Medicaid clawback we keep hearing about? So I want you to be aware of a couple things. One, the Medicaid clawback only applies to money over $100,000. And if the state chooses to be listed as a creditor, so they would actually have to be listed as a creditor of the over $100,000. The other piece to be thinking about, if say there's $70,000 because they were saving to purchase a vehicle, has the person determined who owns that account how they would like their ABLE accounts distributed? It's really important that they also, we were talking earlier about wills, that they have a will for how they would like those funds dispersed if it's under $100,000. There's also other money that's going to come out of there. So you need to be aware that all outstanding qualified disability expenses come out of that under 100,000 or over the 100,000 first. So they're considered above the Medicaid estate recovery, the Medicaid clawback, disability qualified expenses, including reasonable burial costs, are above Medicaid. So again, you have to have quite a bit of money in that account, and there's a few pieces that fall above that. How is an ABLE account different than a special needs trust? an ABLE account provides a lot of choice and control for the beneficiary and their family and friends, besides a special needs trust, as far as what some of those limits are. The cost of establishing an ABLE account is often significantly less than a special needs trust. And just like we talked about before, instead of these thinking as an either or, let's think about what's best for the person and how could these tools complement each other to best meet the needs of the person that we design them to support. And how could those potentially work together? For example, money paid to a Social Security recipient directly from a trust is counted as unearned income. Remember when she said you can't give Johnny cash? Money paid from the trust to the person is considered income and reduces a person's Social Security. But, sorry, another way, if it's also counted as unearned income if that money from that special needs trust currently is used to pay for food or shelter expenses. So then it's considered unearned income. But if the money were put from the special needs trust directly into the ABLE account, then that ABLE account owner is able to use the money for savings to pay for those qualified disability related expenses, which can be their mortgage, can be their rent, without reducing the SSI payment, even if it's food and shelter. And so I'm going to try, and well, I'll have to do it when maybe I can do it this way. I have another link I wanted to share with you guys and put in the chat, but right now with my PowerPoint up, I can't do it. So I'll paste it in as soon as I get through a couple more slides here. Because I have a really nice tool that compares an ABLE account, a pooled trust, a special needs trust, first party and third party, and it's all lined out for you to look at these pieces in a chart. So what are some other resources for you? I have a link here to the Montana ABLE homepage. I have a link here for the ABLE National Resource Center for you. This is a lot of information. I don't want to cover trusts, but if you have questions about ABLE accounts, you've got my information where you can reach me to ask those questions at another time if those pieces come to you. That is a voicemail number, so I virtually will never answer it. It's 500 miles away from me, but let me know when there's a day or time that I can get back to you. And I do work under through funding through Children's Special Health Services. So this project is funded in whole or in part under a contract with Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services. The statement herein do not necessarily reflect the opinion of the department. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to drop this into the chat to everyone as far as where that comparison chart is.
Thank you so much, Theresa. Yeah,
tried to fly through that.
Yeah, a lot of information. Everyone will be able to send out the recording. It might take us a week or so to get that started, but we'll be able to send that out to you all. I just want to bring your attention to a couple of things and then we'll go to the questions. I'm going to have Katie Nuske put a short evaluation into the chat. Please fill it out. You'll notice on there that it asks for your name and address. We have some gift cards that have been gifted to us that are gas gift cards that have been gifted to us from the Mountain States Regional Genetics Collaborative. And if you have your name and address on there, we're going to draw for some of those gift cards, but we have to have that information to give to them. And the feedback you guys give us helps us make changes or additions to our programs. We have another PoP coming up. Hopefully Katie can drop that in the chat too. And then we can, we're just going to spend maybe 10 minutes looking at the questions. Johanna, I wanted to ask you if you were referring to the Real Dynamics when you were talking about the organization in Montana that has the pooled trust.
Yes, Real Dynamics in Great Falls. So, and they're wonderful. So they're a great
Okay.
tool and another great option as well, for sure.
Okay, and I did drop their information in into the chat earlier, but I wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same organization. And then of course now I've lost my chat, so let me get that back up.
Yeah, and I think some of the chat that were there for me. So from Kathleen, I need to be diagnosed as disabled prior to age 26 for now. Correct. Currently, doesn't matter the age that the individual is, but the disability had to be present prior to age 26. I see another one on my son will not be on SSI and Medicaid until age 18, so we have to wait to set up an ABLE account until after he's enrolled in both, right? I'm going to say that obviously there's some medical information there that is pointing to a disability. If under that third choice, if the medical provider is willing to provide that documentation to open an ABLE account, you certainly could do that now rather than waiting until they qualify for Social Security as an adult and get money growing in that account for their use. So I definitely consider that as that third option, because remember that the disability had to be present before age 26, but there were 3 choices on one of those slides there, and it talked about A, SSI or SSDI, B, that they were legally blind, or the third one being that a medical provider is willing to provide written documentation. So if you're aware of that, I certainly would be considering that. From Aaron, our son is disabled and on, I lost it, I went too fast. Our son is on Medicaid. So Aaron, sorry about that, I scrolled too fast. Our son is on Medicaid waiver, but lost SSI due to income assets. Can we still apply for one of these? So again, it's gonna, when did the disability, was that present? So was it prior to age 26? I'm guessing yes, but that's where I would look at is one, was that prior to? They won't, if they're not on SSI now, again, similar to the other one, is there going to be a medical provider who will provide that documentation for you that the disability was present before age 26? So you again would be looking at that third choice there. If we have to homeschool due to medical needs, safety, does that fall under education? Woo. So again, I'd look at what are those expenses and how is it directly related to the individual as far as a qualified disability related expense, relating it back to the individual. Do non-traditional therapies as qualified disability related expenses. For example, music therapy, neurofeedback therapy, or a service dog, things not covered by insurance. And yeah, some of those pieces that you're talking about are exactly where an ABLE account, such as a service dog, can really be helpful, because those are expenses that other people are accessing through their ABLE account. And you can hear stories from ABLE account owners at the National ABLE Resource Center. And I bet if you Google, if you type in their search bar, service dogs, they're going to give you an example of that. And then Katie, I think, put some links in there, and she pulled lovely pieces out of my presentation so you could get all of those. And she has my permission to share my slides. I think that's it. I know I tried not to even look at my notes, so I can't wait to find out what I forgot to tell you.
Thank you so much. Johanna, is there anything that you want to follow up on about the ABLE accounts and the trusts before we close out?
No, I think that I'm going to emphasize they all should work together. Like, it's not one or the other, it's all work together, because if they all work together, you've just provided great tools for your child so that they can navigate the system. So I think it's really important to not think of it, oh, well, I'm going to do an ABLE account, so I don't need this, or I need special needs, I'm not going to do ABLE. It's like, no, use them all, because if you have all those tools available, it's really great way to provide for your child.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that emphasis on individualizing for your child or young adult and for your family, because there isn't a one size fits all with this either. There's so much individual things happening. Thank you so much, everybody, for sticking with us and sticking it through tonight. We're getting lots of good feedback and thank yous over in the chat. There's one more question that we can answer. So let's see. Aaron says, does Johanna only help set up these financial choices and things, or can